today I've been beading up, ready for this rendering job that I'm starting. So I'm rendering a garage basically. So I've got all the beads on, we've got them lined up, we've got them plumb. And the thing is, there's been a damp course that runs throughout. So there's a DPC that runs above the bricks. And what I've done is ran a stop bead all the way across. And now it's the way you should be rendering. And you should be doing that, and that basically stops the damp from bridging. But if you run a stop bead, then that plastic bead will stop any damp from rising above it. So we've got that running through. So I've had to cut the beads down to get it in line with the door and the quirk that's already there. So they've had to be cut down all the way along and all the way down. Next thing is we have Naco drain. So what we're going to do is create a shadow gap. That means we can pull the drain out and clear underneath whenever they can. So this is obviously above the damp course. That's stop damp bridging above. And I'm obviously going to bead in around the vent as well. So then we'll have something nice covered and everything looks clean. So we can get the drain out, and then this stops any damp from bridging. But I just wanted to show you this massive breakthrough. I went to the rendering merchants, or the plastering merchants where I go to. I said, what do you use? What do you recommend for fixing beads? And they've given me this. So this is Grip Bond Pro. So it's basically from Bondit. I'm not endorsed by these guys. First time using it, but it's you can use it externally, internally. It's weatherproofed. Can be applied to wetter surfaces. Can be painted over. It doesn't matter, and it's quick curing. But basically, I've literally just fixed all my beads with this. I've used no nails like in the other videos, the other rendering videos you've seen. I usually used to do it with masonry nails, but this has been an absolute godsend. I've put a few little masonry nails in, but not much. And I must admit, this is a great product to be using. I'm not going to go too much into beading in this video because it's boring, isn't it? No one likes beading. It's a boring subject. I'm sure you don't want to watch it. So let's look at the job. Let's see what we've done. Let's see where we're up to, and let me see what I'm working on at the moment. Wrapping the day up, I'm just working up on this little bit here. So that was half a day with the beading. That's one stage done. Now I'm going to move directly on to the next stage. The next stage rendering is called scratch coat. This is where you apply the base coat of the render, and I'm going to walk you through that whole process right now. It's fairly simple but crucial. Look at that van. That's with half the bags out. Full to the brim. What a disgrace. Yeah, so the van was a state, unfortunately, but that's that. Okay, let's get straight to the video. The first thing you want to do is hose down any background you're working on. Now, when I was working here, it was very dry. There'd not been a lot of rain, so I had to really hose down the brickwork. And that's the first thing. Just make sure the background you're working on has got a lot of moisture in there, so then when you start sticking the render, it's got something to grip to. That's the first big key. Now obviously this is just applying render as is. We're just applying it directly to the brickwork. I've given it a massive hose down beforehand, but these bricks have got a very good key, which means they're very rough, which means it's perfect for the render to stick to. The last thing you want though is for if you've got smooth brickwork or any blocks that haven't got a roughness or a key to them, then make sure you add an additive beforehand, like a render grip. But these were perfect just to go directly onto. Now what I'm doing, I've started from the top, I've actually started from the side. And what I've done today is I'm focusing on getting this whole area scratched. So my mission today is I just wanted to get the whole thing done. So I started early enough, done all the mixing. And what you want to do is just apply the render, but not play with it. What you want to do is get it fairly flat with your trowel. But don't go to the point where you're overworking the render, because it might just come off and fall grip from the wall. Once you've applied your render, you want to apply a scratch. This is called a scarifier. I just call it a scratcher, to be honest, because it scratches the walls. And what you want to be doing is scratching in little curves, and this means that when the render grips, it gives it something to grip to. If you've got angles in there, it gives it a stronger hold, especially if it moves, contracts or expands. then at least the render's got the curves to grip into with. So there's not much to the scratch coat other than just getting it on the wall really. Like I said before, you don't want to overwork the render when you're applying it, because what this does, if you play with the render too much with your trowel, then the steel of the trowel will pull the moisture from the back of the render, pull it to the front, which means it won't have that grip to the initial block work anymore. Getting pretty hot, so some of this on the go. Don't want to burn. Bloody hot day, but lovely to work in, as long as you wore sun cream. So now we're just at the bottoms and working on through now. Like I said, this is probably the tricky part, is working underneath these stop beads. I know it looks like a pain, but it is crucial to make sure that you've got that stop bead, which is going to stop any damp and coming through the render. And so the process is still the same though, even though it's working to soil. What I've done is dug out below beforehand and then rendered as deep as I could. Take away the gutter brackets. Always make sure I make it a bit easier for yourself. I couldn't actually pull this gutter out because and it's stuck to the ground. It's bedded in, so that's staying. Next thing was make sure all the pins are out around from the beads, and then like I said, there's not much to the scratch other than just getting it on. So what I've done working across there is it can be tricky working in small areas. The last thing you want is for the render to be prouder than a bead. So you really need to make sure that when you are applying the render, especially above the heads, that it is nice and tight, that you're behind the bead and nothing's going to be proud, because you need to have room when you're applying your top coat. You need to make sure that you've got at least 6-7 mil when you are applying the top coat, so you've got something to work to and you've got something to float into. And that's it. The whole area is scratched except for that bottom left corner. I ran out of render, can you believe it? I did end up doing it obviously in the end, but yeah, that's a bit of a nightmare, but it's all done. The other thing was I couldn't reach the very top. We're going to go into that in a minute, but yeah, the very top of that garage I couldn't reach on my big ladders, which is also a pain, as you can see up there, but we'll go into that in a minute. So that was the second day done. So we've got beads and we've got the scratch coat done. That's overall a 1.5 days. Now the next day I went in to do the sides, did the side walls on the garage. So I've done that, top coated and finished. Now the day we're going to go up to is this, when we start going into the top coat onto the main garage wall. And this is where we talk about avoiding the sun and making sure we get the perfect finish. So we're going to walk through that right now. Hello. We need to go higher. Okay, the other big thing when you're rendering is you want to avoid direct sunlight. And the reason this was called a race against time is because I've got quite a big area on that garage facing wall there, and I wanted to avoid the sun. The last thing you want is to work in direct sunlight when you're rendering, because it'll just drain the moisture from the render. It'll just sap it, and what it means is either one, it dries too fast, which means it could crack, or two, it's just very hard to work with, and three, worst case, you don't manage to stay on top of it and the render's ruined. That can happen. It's actually happened to me before. It was never a nice experience. So the big thing here is I needed to make sure that I got the render on quite fast and I got it finished quite fast before the sun really came out. So what I did know from doing a scratch coat is I had till about 12 o'clock before the sun started peeping round onto that main wall. So let's go into the process and what happened on that day and see how we did. It's another glorious day. I'm about to do the main wall and I want to get it done before the sun starts peaking. It was actually my birthday yesterday. I had a few friends around, so I've had a few more drinks than what I would usually. But we're okay, we've got to crack on and we've got to do it. So I'm going to set the bandstands up, use that as a platform so I can throw my render up so it saves a bit of time, and then I can reach the top. So let's do it. Very important point again is before you start applying any of the top coat, make sure you drench the walls. So what I do is always drench a scratch coat before I start mixing and really put generous portion of water on there. And this means that when you apply a top coat, the top coat won't be drained, it won't leach all the moisture out of it. So really give it a good spraying, then do the mix. And then by that point, render should be damp but not soaking wet, which is always a good rule of thumb. Now something happened here, something went wrong. I was applying the render and then the GoPro stacked it. Yeah, it fell down, as you can see, which isn't good for a GoPro. And then what happened was I managed to lose a bit of footage. So when the GoPro fell, it kept glitching out. So it was only filming for about 20 to 30 seconds. So I did actually lose quite a bit of footage here. But I'm still going to get an essence of what the top coat involves and exactly how I did it. But yeah, I apologise. I lost a bit of footage. Dropped the GoPro. Never good. Damaged it. But I did redeem myself. I had to reset it and all that. But yeah, let's crack on anyway. What we're doing is, for the top coat, is you apply the render the exact same as what you did with the scratch. The mix is different. The top coat is 5:1 with 1 lime. The scratch coat is 4:1. But we'll go into that. There should be a video around here popping up for the perfect mix if you're interested in that. But basically what you do is you apply the render to the scratch coat. Again, you want to make sure your scratch coat is nice and damp. And then you rule it flat. That's exactly what I'm doing here. This is a feather edge. And you don't ever trowel your render flat, you always rule it flat. So that's what we're getting onto there. So yeah, I've ruled it flat. Again, that's where I lost footage. I know it's a big jump going from all the way to the top to the bottom. But what I had to make sure is that I've had to do it in stages. So I've had to come around the top. But then to make sure that you don't have any sponge marks or that nothing's left behind, I've had to come up and around the window. So I've started from the top. Then gone left, jumped to the right of the window, left of the window, right of the window. What I didn't want to do is come down one side, and if I followed it all the way around and tried to meet it at that point on the other side, then it would have dried too soon. So again, not only have I had to chase the sun, but I've had to make sure that I've kind of hit the render systematically so it never dries too early. Because the thing is with render, you always need to sponge into the section that you've done before. We're going to go into that in a minute. But basically, you need to make sure that you aren't chasing your tail. So I've started to the top and I've had to work either side of the window and then meeting at the bottom here in the middle. That's why I'm meeting in the middle, because basically I've made sure both sides are finished and then the bottom can be finished off from there. So I've applied the render. I'm ruling it flat at the moment. Exactly, just getting all this excess render, putting it back in the tub and then ruling it. And basically, this is dark art, but the ruling is where you get the flatness from the walls from. It don't come from anything else other than the ruling. So you really need to make sure that this point and this stage is bang on. So that's the ruling, and that's the main part of the application done. I've had to jump on it straight away. I've started at the top, I've started to float it up. And this actual right side is still actually a bit wet, but the last thing I want is for the sun to come out and dry it off. So I've had to kind of float through it and just make sure that I've had to keep sticking. So as you can see, I've started on the right side of the window and then I jumped to the left, working down either side of that window and then meeting in the middle underneath. And again, that's to make sure that when you're coming up from the top, you can always sponge into the section you've done before you. So let's jump back to the video there. So as you can see, I'm floating, and then basically what this stage does is further flattens the render. So once you've ruled it, there still might be some low spots, or there still might be a few high spots. What the floating does is it makes sure that it pulls off any spots that are too high and fills in the low. And not only that, it starts to smooth the render up, and it starts to get it ready for the final stages, which is the sponging. We'll go into that in a minute. This is a Rafina Diamond Float. It's a brilliant piece of kit. Like I said, I prefer to usually use my Rafina Power Float, but it's actually been misbehaving. It's not doing too well at the moment, so I've had to go fully manual with these again. So if you do have any low spots, just grab a bit of render, the same stuff that you used to apply it, and then you literally apply it to any areas that have been a bit low, and you just rub it into itself. That's how you do it. You basically, with the low spots, take the render and then fill it back in again. As you can see, the top's been kind of finished. Now what we come on to is the sponging. So once you've floated, you sponge it. This is basically the final stage of rendering, and it's the stage that makes it look really nice. This is just a little sponge. Again, you want to make sure that it's damp but not wet. And then all you do is, when you're sponging, is you bring the aggregate to the surface, and it gives that render its traditional, nice, finished look. And this is the final stage rendering. And at this point, we're still clear of the sun, which is lovely. Because, again, I've really had to plough through this to make sure I didn't get caught out. But if there's one thing I can say, it's just avoid the sun. As you can see, the sun's starting to show through now, but I was at the bottom of this point, which is nice. And then I've got the shade from the bandstand, so I am pretty safe. Again, all I'm doing now is coming to the very bottom. We're nearly there in the process. And here's the finish, here's the look. That's that side done. Gone well, considering the sun could have caught us out, but yeah, it went very well. Big wall done, happy about that. Now the choice is, I can finish all the little bits. Like I said, it was my birthday yesterday, I've got a family coming, so I'm actually going to jib home, come back, put all the light fittings on, put the guttering back, clean everything up, and I'm going to come back after the bank holiday and do it, because it's my birthday. I deserve a break. It was quite a good hit, and it's looking good. So we'll come back to do the last bits on Tuesday. This is it's actually the 5th day, but if we timed it in work, it would have been 4 days if I would have just carried on and just did the bottoms in the same day. But like I said, it was my birthday, I wanted to get home, my family were coming down. So this would have been 4 days if I wasn't slacking. But yeah, anyway, same process. We've just applied the render to the bottoms, and all I'm doing at this stage is floating it up. And all you want to do is work into that stop bead. What you want to avoid though is getting the render too far over your finished part. What happens is, if you render into the finished area, it can stain it, and it can create a build up. So you really want to be careful. It's just you work to your stop bead, and you kind of stop it there. As you can see, I've been sponging the tops to make sure that it cleared back. And yeah, you want to try and make it neat, and you want it to run in line with the wall above, so when it's painted it just looks like one area. As you can see, I'm cleaning the excess render from above the bead, and then same thing, damp sponge, not wet, so tapping out any excess water, and then sponging the top so it's clear of any excess, and then sponging it into the stop bead. So then when it's done, you won't have this ugly bead showing through. It should be painted, you'll see a faint line, but it won't be clear, and the wall should look like it's one solid slab of render, which is what we want. So that is the full process of rendering the garage. Said it took 4 days. Here's the finished product. And yeah, it was a lovely job, to be fair. Everything's protected, so everything's clean at the end, and as you can see, it's looking good. So that is the process of rendering a garage wall. If you like this video, please hit the like button, please subscribe, and make sure you check out this video that's popped up here. So the video that's popped up now is the 7 golden rules of rendering, and these are the rules you need to follow if you're going to get success in rendering. So you've seen the video, the brief process, how it's done. This video here will go into depth on how to get real results in rendering, so hit that now and take it